Hello developers, welcome back to another episode of developing beautiful apps with JavaScript. So as we have learned all the JavaScript basics from the JavaScript basic series, we can make use of it and then build so many applications so that all the necessary things we have learned so far is actually imprinted in our memory, right? So if you guys haven't watched the JavaScript basic series, then I will link you to the JavaScript basic series in the description. So go through it, and if you have any doubt, please let me know in the comments. So today we are going to be building a task manager app, as you can see over here, and then it's just purely basic HTML, which with just a card on top of it, and then it has a task input field and then a button to actually add the task. That's it. So if I press add a task and then click on add, you get a card with saying that okay, this is the task and the status is actually pending, and you have two buttons. One is mark as completed and then the other one is delete. So you can toggle in between like mark as completed and mark as pending, right? So and then if you want to add another one, you can add it as well. So if you want to delete the completed task, then you can click on delete, which will ask you for a confirmation saying that okay, do you really want to delete this particular task? So if you press confirm, it should delete the task, and if not, it shouldn't. So cancel, I didn't delete. If you press on confirm, yeah, I deleted. Okay, so we are going to be making use of the local storage mechanism for the storing part. We are not going to go into any backend code, so we are directly storing it into the local storage we have. So if you go to application tab and then click on local storage, you have your site over here listed, and then most of the time you guys will have access to 127.0.0.1 if you're going to be developing with the live server extension. So you can see it's a key value pair, both are strings, and then I'm gonna keeping it under task, and then you can build the array of objects, which has as of now only car wash is available. So if you add another one, this also gets updated. Right now we have two elements, one is at 0th index and the other one is at first index. So by default the completed in the beginning, by default the completed status will be false, and then if you change it, this should change, right? All right, so this is what we're going to build. So as always, what we're going to do is we are going to create a folder, and then inside the folder we are going to create an index.html file, and then I'm going to copy the index.html file contents from the link I have. Which I will put it in the description so that you guys can just copy it and then be done with it, because we don't want to go through the whole HTML and CSS in this video. We are going to just be using the JavaScript part, right? So I'm going to also create another file called style.css, and then this one also I'm going to copy paste and then save both of them, and then I'm gonna go live. And also I need to create a script.js file, so where we will write all the JavaScript code. Okay, script.js, and then for checking if it's being loaded, I will say hello, I am here. All right, so now let's just check if this is working by using go live. So go live is a VS Code extension which you can actually get through here. So all of you guys have extensions over here. If you go to menu view extensions, you can see here I have the live server already installed. If you guys haven't installed it, you can just search for live server and then install it. So it's actually pretty helpful when you're developing applications, so that you don't have to go through once you save and then you have to refresh the page again to show the changes, right? So what live server does is it will run in a port, and then once you save, it will automatically refresh the page for you. Okay, so let's check if this is working. Let's go to inspect element, and then let's go to console. Yeah, so that's working because the console is being printed over here. Like if I change, live server will automatically, once I save, yeah, it automatically refresh for me. All right, so that's also working. Now let's get to it. So let's go through the HTML page really quick. So we have two sections, one is a section and then one is a container for confirming. So this part we will handle all the task manager logic, and then this one we will just ask for the confirmation pop-up. So this is the confirmation pop-up part, and then inside the task manager part we have a header which is showing all the card class and everything, right? Heading, and then we have a form with the ID of task form, and then we have an input element and then a submit button, right? And then we also have an empty section for the task containers, which will handle all the task being displayed. Okay, so that's about it. That's the HTML. Let's get into JavaScript. Okay, for now, in the beginning, we will access all the elements that we are going to be reusing throughout the video, throughout the program. So I'm going to access this particular element in the beginning. So const task manager container, and then document dot query selector. It has a class of task manager. So I'm going to copy class can be accessed with dot, right? So I'm going to use dot task manager, and then I'm going to be also accessing the confirm element, which is also having an ID of confirm. So I'm going to copy that, and then I'm going to do document dot query selector dot confirm. Okay, and then inside the confirm, if you notice, I have two buttons. One is with the class confirmed, and then the other one is with the class cancel. So we need to listen to this particular button click so that we know that, okay, if you are going to delete, if the deletion is being confirmed or cancelled. Yeah, so for that, we need to add an event listener to this particular button. So for that also, I will like assign it to a variable saying that confirmed L, or confirm button, we can call it confirm button document dot query selector confirmed, right? So yeah, it's confirmed. Now another one is cancel. So we will also access the const cancel ptn as document dot query selector cancel. Okay, now that we have it, so we need to listen to the, so let's, now that we have it, let's get into the task adding part. So we need to access this particular task, right? So we will listen for the form to be submitted, then only we need to access this particular task input value. So for that to happen, we have to select this particular button and then listen for the submit event on this particular form. So document dot, as you can see, the form has an ID of task form. So by clicking on this submit button, what happens is this form will get submitted. So we will use document dot get element by ID, and then the form ID, which is task form dot, and then we will add an event listener for listening for a submit event, right? Submit event. And then in case of submit event, what I will do is I will call another function called handle form submit. Okay, so we just write out the function to handle the form submit event. So function handle form submit, which by default, since you are listening for an event listener, it will have access to the event which actually triggered. So we will accept as a parameter, even though you don't pass any variable to it, this will actually have access to the event listener which actually triggered that particular form. So we are going to access this event of that particular event listener. So which event actually triggered it, right? We want to know it. Okay, and then in case of traditional JavaScript, what happens is if you submit a form, this page gets refreshed. So this will say, hello, I am here. And then if you submit something, let's say buy grocery, if you submit, if you notice it, it's actually refreshing the whole page. Hello, I am here, and then it's refreshing the page. So in traditional JavaScript, what it does is like when you submit a form, the form will actually post to a URL, which you can give it over here in action, and then you submit it a URL post, and then method equal to post, and then action equal to the URL you want to go to, right? So this will actually take the input value to the backend server, and then in turn backend server will process that particular input and then give it back a result saying that, okay, this particular event has been, or this particular task has been saved. Now we can display it from the DB. So modern JavaScript doesn't do that. Modern JavaScript, we can actually inhibit that particular event, that particular default behavior, by using event dot prevent default. So this function, what it does is it actually inhibits whatever whatever the default behavior of that particular form submit is. So if you notice, if I am calling event.prevent default, if you notice, if I give by grocery the not task, it's still there. And then if I submit again, it's still there, it's still there, it's still there. So we can emulate a more appealing way of building out an application, right? So most of the user will see that, okay, so it's not refreshing and I don't have to wait for the whole thing to complete and then come back again. So that's one thing that most of the JavaScript applications which are using called single page applications. So basically you can emulate a single page kind of feel without refreshing the page itself. So that's what this event.prevent default is. Okay, you can inhibit the default behavior. So once you have the event which is being prevented by default, then you can access the const input element, which I will assign it a variable saying that document dot I think it's an element by ID. So yeah, you can use it, get element by ID, and then task input. So once you have it, we need the task value as well, right? So that's the main thing we are looking for. So for that, we can get it by task input dot value dot trim. So what trim does is, like, if you look at it, removes this leading and trailing white space and line terminator characters from a string. So let's say you have a string. Okay, so I'm going to print out task value. And then if you look at it, if you do by grocery and then you add ending space and then also beginning space, it will only give the value without the space, trailing or beginning task, right? So a leading and trailing spaces, it's not there. But if you don't use trim, what happens is, and then you do by grocery. So if you look at it, see, there are all the leading spaces and trailing spaces are there. So this is kind of tricky to handle because, like, in most of the developer systems, in real world, this issue has been faced a lot. So most of the time we would use trim on any value we get from the user, because sometimes this can cause serious problems as, like, the program goes on. So make sure you use trim on all the input fields. That's a good practice to follow. All right. And then now we have the task value from the input field. Now we can see that if the task value is not equal to an empty string, if it's an empty string, we don't want to do anything, right? So we will, if it's not an empty string, we will create an object called new task, and inside the task we will have two keys called text, which will have the task value itself, and then we will have another one called completed. By default it will be on false. So this is the status of this particular task. So it's false, and then the other one is the actual text value. Okay, so now we need to save this into the local storage we have. So for that, I'm gonna create a global variable called const task, which will be initialized with an empty array. Okay, so I'm gonna push this newly created array into that global array. So I'm gonna say new task. Okay, and then we will call a function to save these tasks. Okay, all right, let's check if it's working, and then we should create a function for it. Say function to save the task. So function save tasks, and then we will take the global array and then save it into the local storage. So local storage, we can save it by set item followed by a key value, which is, I'm going to call it as task, and then any string value. So in our case, this is an array of objects, JSON objects, right? So we can't store it directly as an array of JSON objects. Instead, we will use JSON.stringify method, which is part of JavaScript, core JavaScript itself. So what it does is it takes a array or any object which is a primary data structure for JavaScript, then we can make it into a stringified version. So it converts this array of objects into a string version. So now that our local storage can support it, right? So if you want to read it back, then what you have to do is, like, you have to get the task and then you have to JSON.parse it. So it's in a string format. When you call the parse method, it will give it back to the array of JSON actual format we have, like this one. Okay, So let's just check if it's being saved in our case. So I'm gonna buy grocery and then our task. Let's go to our application tab and then local storage, and let's check. So it's already there. Wait one sec, let me delete this. So it shouldn't be there. I think it's from the previous one. So by default it won't be there anything. There won't be anything as I refresh, and then if I press buy grocery and then I add the task, as you can see it's being generated. So if you look at the task, the key name is task, and then you have a string version of an array of objects. So at the index 0 we have buy grocery, and then the completed status is false. So if you notice, so it's getting saved, so that's fine. If you notice, even after getting saved, this field didn't actually clear it out itself, right? So the customer is there is no way to know him, like it's actually got saved. So what we can do is we can access the task input element, which is the input element, and then I can say task input dot value equal to empty. So this should set it back to an empty string. And then once we have it, we have to show this task as a card over here, right? So for that, I'm going to call render task. Okay. So what render task does is it takes this particular task array and then display it. Okay. So I'll call function to render the task. Okay, function render task. For now, let's just check if the task array is there or not. Console.log task, and then I'm going to print task. Okay. And then if you refresh, if you go ahead to console, before that, let's add another one, car wash. Okay, so it's there. And then if you go ahead to console, we have it. But if you notice one thing, when you refresh the page, it's not there, right? So in the beginning itself, it's not calling the render task function. So that's why it's not handling the initial task, even though we have a value in our local storage as car wash. So for that, after the handle phone submit event, I will also call render task. So in the beginning, we also need to get the, when you initialize the task array, we have to get the local storage value as well. So for that, as I mentioned, we can use local storage dot get item and then tasks. So if, let's check with an OR condition, okay, double OR, which means like it will check for this particular part. If it's not there, it will initialize with a empty array. So remember, as I said earlier, this is only a stringified format. It will only return a string format, which we can't do anything with it, right? So if you look at it, let's check. And then if you go to console, as you can see, it's a string. It's not an object. If you want to make sure, I think we can use type of. So as you can see, it's a string value, right? So we need an array of objects that then only we can like loop through it. So for that, we can again make use of JSON library, and then we can use the parse. So if you look at it now, it's being converted into object. Okay. So now let's check if the objects are visible in from our end. So yeah, it's object array of objects are visible. So array has a length of one element, and then that element is over here. So now let's get into the render task part. Okay, in this one, I will go through each of them. Task dot for each. Each task, and then I'm gonna also get the index because it's an array of objects. I have access to the index as well. So index in case of array, it doesn't change the index value. So when you push it in any order, that order is always preserved. But in case of object, it's not true. It can come in different ways, like maybe text in the beginning and completed in the second one as. But in case of array, it always preserve the index. It always preserve the order you have put it in. So I'm just going to print out the index just to see if it's there or not. That's it. I'm not going to use it for anything else. Okay, so we need to display all these tasks in a container. So we have already defined a container over here. So I'm gonna get this into a variable saying that task container equal to document dot get element by id task container. Okay, so now we have the task container at our hand. Then to make sure that it's actually empty when the render task is called, we will set the inner HTML of that particular task container into empty string. Okay, that's the initialization part. Okay, now we have an empty task container for us, and then what we can do is we can loop through all these tasks, and then for each task what we'll do is we'll create a task card. So task card is actually creating a document dot create element, not create attribute, create element, and then a div element. Okay, so this particular div element should, if you look at the style.css, you can see that each of the task card has a class. So let's add this particular class into that task card. Task card dot class list dot add, then task card. Okay, so now we have the task card defined at this, and then I'm going to also create a class value variable and then initialize it with a pending class, and then I'm going to also create a text value which is the status, or you can call it status value as pending. Okay, so what necessarily this does is each of the card, if you look at each of the card, the pending has a different color and then the completed has a different color, right? So for that to happen, we have two classes over here, completed and pending, which handles two different colors. So I'm going to check if this particular task has been completed. If it's completed, then I will set the class value to completed. If it's not completed, then I will initialize as pending, and then the status should be pending and completed depending on the completed flag itself. So both of them I have initialized in the beginning, and then I'm going to check if the task at hand completed flag is true, then I'm going to change the class value to completed, and then the status value to completed string as well. Okay, now we just need to show it. So I'm going to say task card dot append child. No, wait, task card dot class list dot add the class value. So this will have the class value over here, and then we need to add this particular task card into the task container we have created. So in the end we will say that task container dot append child task card. Okay, so now we have a pending task which doesn't have any value in it. So now we need to show the task text value and then the status of that particular task itself. So the text value will be car wash and then the status will be pending. So we already have the pending as the status value over here. So I'm going to create two elements. One is called the task text itself, and then I'm going to create an element with a paragraph element. Okay, I have a paragraph element, and then I'm going to set the inner text of that element into the task dot text value. So I have access to the task dot text value. I'm gonna put it, and then I'm gonna say that okay, now I need to add this particular element into the task card. So in this task card I need to add this task text element. So if I do that, as you can see, it's here, right? And then the next step would be also adding the status value. So for that I will create another element, another paragraph element, saying that task status equal to document dot create element, and then paragraph element, and then I'm gonna set the task status element dot inner text as the status value we have created over here. Okay, and then I'm gonna also append that to the task card we have already created. Task card append child, task status. Okay, so if you notice, like, it's not the same styling we have used over here. So I think it has a styling class called status. Yes, it's here. So we need to add that particular class to the task status element. So task status dot class list dot add status. Okay, so now this should work. Yeah, it's working. So now we have created the text element, the pending element, and we have appended it to the container. So even if you refresh, it's actually working. And then if you add another one by grocery and then add task, so it's coming. Okay, so I think the video is going too long, so I'm gonna finish the video for here now. You can do one thing, you can go through the HTML, and then if you go through the styles, you can see that I'm using 2 buttons, right? So if you look at the final episode, final output, you can see that there are 2 buttons. One is for completed value and then the other one is for delete value. So each of these plugin has the same class, button box, and then if you are going for completed, and then you can use the green class, and then if you are going for delete, you can go for the red class. And then each of these button box has another span element which has the styling for this font style and the spacing. So check if you can create those elements over here itself inside it, and then add an event listener to it. Like if this particular button is clicked, then you have to change the status of this particular task to completed, and vice versa, pending as well. If you click on delete, just alert saying that okay, this element needs to be deleted. So check if you can do it on your own. If you can't, then it's fine, we will tackle it in the next episode. So until then, if you have any comments or if you have any questions about this particular episode or the previous ones, please don't hesitate to ask. Feel free to comment at the video, and then I will get back to you guys as soon as possible. All right, until then, keep coding. I'll see you guys in the next one.